Hi, I'm Aaron Walter. I'm the youth pastor and associate priest here at St. Thomas Church. Welcome to episode 9 of the St. Thomas video podcast. You're invited today to hear from Genevieve Pell as she tells her story of hope and unexpected places.
When Father Aaron asked that I share a story of hope, there was one story that immediately came to mind that actually took place in 2020 of all years. And so that's the story that I'll be sharing with you today. I did not obtain permission from the other members of the story, so I will not be sharing their personal information, and I've changed their names as I describe the interactions that we had to maintain their privacy. Except for my immediate family, I will say their names. In the summer of 2019, Scott, my husband, and I decided that we were going to grow our family. And at that time, our son, Gabriel, was about 1.5 years. And we knew that the process might take a while. So in the fall and winter of 2019 and 2020, we began and finalized the application and home study process to once again become adoptive parents. We were very excited to receive our license in February of 2020. We were literally matched with a birth mother less than a month later. And then a week after that, I discovered that I was pregnant. Surprise! Now, mind you, I had all of the classic symptoms of pregnancy: nausea, food aversion, exhaustion, all of those wonderful things that birth mothers know. But I just had a flu bug, right? Because I couldn't get pregnant. So finally, I don't know exactly what it was that triggered me to finally, take the test, and what instinct finally kicked in that I went, red flag, you might be pregnant. But I went in, got my blood test. The blood test showed that I was pretty far along into my first trimester, possibly. So I went in for an ultrasound, and sure enough, I was almost done with my first trimester. So once again, here Scott and I had plans, and we were trying to, figure life out, and God said, ha, I have different plans for you. So now what do? We've been matched with a birth mother who is due in May. This poor woman, I can only imagine, I can only speculate what she must be thinking and feeling at this point. And then Scott and I are like, well, do we really want to have a 4-month-old when I'm expected to deliver? And I looked at him and I said, Scott, what about Sarah and Mike? Sarah was an old friend of Scott's, and she and her husband, we knew, had been on the adoption road. They, I think, had started their adoption process when we had started with Gabriel. So it had been a really long, difficult road for them. They had a very different story than Scott and I did with our agency. But again, speculation, but having been in their shoes, I can only imagine that their hope had been dimming. So with the idea that, oh my gosh, Scott, maybe this baby isn't ours. Maybe this baby is, belongs to Sarah and Mike. All of a sudden, the events that were about to transpire were no longer in our hands. But they were in the hands of God, and we simply became instruments of the Holy Spirit. Finally, in my 30s, I recognized for the first time the Holy Spirit working through me. I'm sure it wasn't the first time that God had worked through me and used the Holy Spirit to work through me, but it was the first time that I really recognized it. And it was the first time that I had no doubt in my heart that I was not in control here, I was not in charge, I was simply being used as a mechanism, and that Scott and I were being used as a mechanism for God's plan to unite this beautiful baby boy with his parents. Again, I can only speculate the emotions of the birth mother and the adoptive parents, as it is their story and not my story, but we were blessed to be a part of the story. Having been through the process ourselves several years before, I can imagine the hope that emerged when we asked the birth mother's permission to reach out to this prospective couple. I know hope was bubbling through me, and it did through the entire process. And as the events continued to unfold and phone calls were made and meetings were set up, I remember lying in bed one night and looking at Scott and said, "This is Sarah and Mike's baby. This is it. I know in my heart this is their son." Having never been in the role of birth mother through the adoption process, I can only imagine what she felt when she found out that she was expecting, unexpectedly expecting, the beginning of that whole decision-making process. But I can also imagine the hope that derives after reaching out to an agency, after receiving the emotional support and guidance that one would need through that whole decision-making process. And then the hope after meeting a prospective adoptive couple who so desperately want to love and care for your child. I know that was our experience when Scott and I went through that, and all of the fear slowly fades away and hope just sort of takes hold and takes its place. I remember when we originally called Sarah and Mike, we received permission from the birth mother to reach out to them. And she agreed, and we made that initial phone call to help facilitate this process. And the four of us were on speakerphone. And as Scott and I started to reveal the circumstances, you could just feel the excitement on the other end of the line. We weren't with them, but you could feel it. And at one point, when we asked a question, I think it was something about, is this something that you would like us to pursue and help facilitate? And I remember Sarah saying and vocalizing over the phone, Mike is exuberantly nodding his head. Yes. So it was, it filled our hearts, filled our spirits to know that God has it figured out. And thank goodness he does, because I clearly don't. And I'll also never forget, this kind of goes back to our experience with the adoption process with our eldest. And I'll never forget when Scott and I first shared with my parents the news of being matched with Gabriel's birth mother. And I remember my dad, out of love and protection for his own child, me, my father warned. He said, "Hey, it's never over until the check clears," right? And what he meant was, I know you're excited, but the situation could change, and I don't want to see my own daughter to be heartbroken. Because he had known, he knew, was very aware of the struggles that we had experienced up to this point. And my response to him was unwavering, as I had already put a lot of thought and prayer into that exact circumstance, and I reassured him that I have to jump in with my whole heart, because I don't ever want Allison to think that we are not fully committed or that we have any reservations with taking on the responsibility of raising Gabriel. She needed to be reassured and know that in her heart, Scott and I were all in. So, hope shows itself in mysterious ways when we least expect it. God provides us hope when we need it most. And yes, the Pells are that family that who adopted and then got pregnant. And now we have two beautiful boys who bring us light and hope every day.